Welcome to the Still Small Voice Within podcast. I'm Pamela J. Alexander. Each week we'll begin with the question, explore a few observations from life, share a story, and see what wisdom might emerge along the way. Today's question is, what if you're not broken? Wonder if you're not broken, only organized around survival in a way that no longer serves your life. I've spent a great deal of my life exploring this very question. And while I certainly don't have all the answers, here are 5 things life has taught me along the way. First, many people organize their lives around survival without realizing it. And most survival strategies don't announce themselves as survival strategies. Often they look like responsibility, independence, achievement, perfectionism, diligence, people-pleasing, emotional self-sufficiency, or just being realistic. The challenge is that once a strategy helps us survive, we can mistake it for who we are. We may not even realize how much of our life is organized around avoiding pain, disappointment, rejection, uncertainty, or loss. And at some point, many people discover that the very strategies that once protected them are now limiting their capacity for joy, connection, spontaneity, and aliveness. The question then becomes, what am I protecting myself from? And equally important, what is that protection costing me? Second is that transformation often begins long before we consciously understand it. People frequently imagine transformation as a dramatic moment, an insight, a breakthrough, a decision. But looking back, meaningful change often begins years before we recognize it. A question appears, a book resonates, a relationship shifts something, a habit changes, a life that once felt normal starts feeling too small. At the time, these moments rarely seem significant. Only later, if at all, do we realize they were the first signs that something inside was already moving. Growth is often occurring beneath conscious awareness long before we have a language for it. Third, real growth is cultivated through sustained inquiry, lived experience, and participation, not quick fixes. We live in a culture that loves solutions, 5 steps, 10 habits, 1 breakthrough. But some forms of wisdom can't be downloaded. They must be lived. Understanding fear is different from meeting fear. Reading about trust is different from practicing trust. Learning about mindfulness is different from sitting quietly with the immediacy of not being able to sit still. Transformation often emerges from thousands of small moments, observing, experimenting, failing, adjusting, reflecting, and participating more consciously in our own lives. Cultivation is slow, but cultivated things tend to last. The fourth was a little more difficult for me to wrap my head around. Emotional healing is not the elimination of suffering. Rather, it's a new relationship to fear, uncertainty, and life itself. One of the great misconceptions about healing is that eventually fear disappears. My experience is that it doesn't. Uncertainty still exists, loss still happens, disappointment still hurts. What changes is our relationship to those experiences. Fear becomes information instead of prophecy. Uncertainty becomes possibility instead of danger. Difficult emotions become experience to navigate rather than emergencies to solve. And the goal is not fearlessness. The goal is developing enough trust in ourselves and in life that fear no longer gets the final vote. And finally, perhaps the deepest questions are not what's wrong with me, but who am I underneath survival? Many of us spend years trying to repair ourselves, trying to become better, stronger, more successful, more healed. But sometimes the more interesting question is not what needs fixing. Sometimes the question is, who would I be if I wasn't organizing so much of my life around fear? And what if nothing essentially is missing? What if the qualities we are seeking, curiosity, joy, creativity, connection, courage, love, and peace, are not things we must acquire, but capacities waiting for more room to emerge? Perhaps the journey is not becoming someone else. Perhaps it's becoming more fully ourselves. For years, I believed life was something to endure. And that belief did not come from nowhere. It came from family systems, emotional conditioning, survival strategies developed in childhood to cope with a chaotic household, disappointments, relationships, and the quiet assumptions people inherit without questioning. And it's not entirely gone. I sent a text to a friend the other day, and that same thought surfaced again. So awareness does not eliminate old conditioning. But somewhere underneath all of that, another voice keeps asking, why? And that question has become the thread running through my life. Why do people suffer? Why do we repeat patterns? Why do some relationships feel consuming and others feel spacious? Why do fear and reality become confused? Why do we believe what we're told about ourselves? And that inquiry did not produce instant answers or quick transformation. Instead, it unfolded over decades. Over decades. Quitting smoking, divorce and relocation, meditation practice, mindfulness training, solitude, journaling, nervous system awareness, grief, love, and slowly learning to live differently, one small, uneventful decision at a time. At one point during a silent meditation retreat, I had this experience where my ordinary sense of self completely dissolved. And whether interpreted psychologically, spiritually, neurologically, or symbolically, one realization remained: everything is connected. Not necessarily predetermined, not magically guaranteed, just interconnected. And even with that realization, my understanding did not globally change. My understanding evolved one realization at a time. Oh, this is connected to that, and that, and that, until finally, oh, everything really is connected. And years later, I met someone whose presence quietly accelerated the integration already underway inside of me. The relationship itself was not the answer, but it became a mirror, a catalyst, a proving ground for a different way of living. More spacious, more easeful. Yes, more complicated and nuanced, but less defensive, less dramatic, less organized around catastrophe, and more rooted in reality instead of fear. And over time, I realized something profound. I was not becoming someone new. I was becoming myself underneath years of learned survival. I was becoming more me. And here's what I understand now. Perhaps many people are not fundamentally broken. Maybe, just maybe, many of us simply learned ways of survival that once worked, but no longer serve the lives we're trying to live now. Cultivation is not the same as repair. A cultivated life asks for curiosity, participation, patience, experimentation, reflection, embodiment, and courage. Not the courage to become perfect, but the courage to remain open enough to ask, no, to keep asking. Wonder if, imagine if, what if? Because the beautiful questions do not close life down. They reopen it again and again and again. And often those questions come from the still small voice within. And here we explore what it means to trust, understand, and ultimately reconnect with that voice through awareness. Not to escape the world, but to live more fully in the world. And with that in mind, before we part, I'd like to leave you with a few questions. What questions have you been living? What experiences have shaped you? What are you learning that you haven't yet put into words? And what is your still small voice trying to tell you? Take these questions if they're useful. If they're not, that's okay. They'll be here when you're ready and if you need them. And with that, until next time, be well.